Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the amazing Zero Gravity. How you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for giving me something to do today.
No, I'm so excited that I'm privileged enough to be able to hang out with you. A little bit about you before we get to the reason why we're here. Zero is a content creator, host, and entertainer with a focus on horror, sci-fi, and dark fantasy realms, as well as curates and hosts nerdy fundraisers, events, and parties at New York's spookiest MC. That's got to be the dopest. Like, that's the dopest title I've ever heard. Like, I am New York City's spookiest MC. Like, that is the dopest thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
When she's not on her feet behind the mic, you can find her in her creepy corner of the internet for killer movie reviews, inclusive panels, Twitch streams, and more. If you want to follow along with all that amazing stuff, all you gotta do is click these links down here in the description. They're all here for you. So I could strongly recommend you follow everything that Zero's doing. So what got you started in the horror genre, doing what you're doing, being an MC and doing all the things like that? Like, what pushed you to actually start that?
It was actually kind of a long process. I this was something that I never really wanted for myself, I guess. But I've definitely come a long way. I started just in the nerdy scene in general, and the general New York area, going to events. It was really just an easier way for me to make friends.
Sure.
I'm sure, as many of us and many of your viewers can understand, when you're a young person interested in fandom, sometimes it's hard to find other people that understand your fandom, if you know what I'm saying. So I was reading lots of comics, I was watching a lot of anime at the time, reading, some cruel underground manga shit, and I wanted to connect on that basis, but my high school friends, my middle school and high school friends didn't really get it. So I started going to these events in hopes that I could meet people that would have similar,
Yeah.
interests as me, and then we could form a relationship. And that's really where I started. And then shortly after, started marketing myself online as just kind of like a nerdy entity. It started with just like sharing things I love on the internet. And I found that not only going to in-person events was a good way to meet people, but you can meet even more cool people online, just
Mhm.
who don't happen to be in your immediate circle. So through playing video games and just hanging out on Skype and stuff, I was able to meet a lot of cool people, which kind of like stuck me to the internet, I guess. Um, yeah, and then I really just started exploring fandom more. It really was just kind of like, let me just throw this out there and see who like calls back to me. Because if I make a post about Alien, then I'm gonna find all these other Alien fans, and I like to keep that coming because I'm one of those people who really, um, I really abide by the community. I think community is key. It's like a nice safety blanket, and everybody deserves that. And especially right now, the past 2 years going through this pandemic,
Yeah.
it's been very hard, for just people to connect, and especially since I'm an extrovert and I love meeting new people, it's been really hard.
Mhm.
So it's a great way to keep the connection and have good conversation. And here I am now.
And doing things like this, like, it's funny how when I was in high school, because I'm with you. I grew up in a town that had more ears of corn than people,
Oh
and
man.
it was very hard to find people that were open minded to different things. It was pretty close minded, and me being a little punk rock kid that loved horror movies, and it was very hard to find people I related to. And these avenues we have now of the internet and Zoom, Skype, these things that we can connect with people that do have similar interests than us. They may be thousands of miles away, but we share the same bloodlines there. We know what we love, and we love each other. And one thing I love about you is you make it a point to talk about being inclusive. And I've always said, sure, horror has its fair share of gatekeepers and douchebags, just like every community, but it's one of the most inclusive communities I've ever had the honor of being a part of. It doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, black, white, Jew, Christian, Muslim. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. The minute you hear "I love Freddy Krueger," somebody else is gonna be like, "Hey, welcome to primetime, bitch!" Ah! Like,
Yeah.
this is what we do, and I love the fact that it's color blind, it's sex blind, it's religion blind. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter because we love the same thing, and it connects us in these amazing ways. And to know that you're really pushing for everything to be so inclusive really means a lot to me too, because that's something that I think is very, very special about our community.
I 100% agree. Community is key.
It is. And I've gotten to meet some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. I've become best friends with some of the people that I have now just through horror movies and doing this right here. So I got another person to add to that list, Xero. It makes it so much more
Nice.
fun to be
Love
able to learn
that.
how this started for you, because we all love horror, but in order to fall in love with something, you have to meet it. So I want to know how you fell in love with horror, how it got started for you. So your first horror movie, Xero, and your first horror movie was
Jaws. Yes. There we go. Nice.
oh man, I try to be very, very,
Oh,
I try to
nice. He
dress
came
for the
prepared. Let's get it. Nice.
so do you remember about how old you were, Xero, the first time that you had watched Jaws?
Oh, hell yeah, I do. It was actually it's like burned into my mind now. Like I will never be able to forget. I was probably around 8. It was not 100% consensual, I would say. But yes, I was in elementary school and I was at a sleepover. It was this girl in my grade. Her name was Justine. This is like the movie is playing in my mind right now, man. Yeah, so I, pull up with my sleeping bag to this girl, Justine. She was in my class. And I remember she had a very like cozy house. It was like almost like a wooden cabin. So, we could just start there to set the scene, right? But it was me and a bunch of other girls having a sleepover. And I remember very vividly her father was this like very tall, broad-shouldered white man, and he had like a very thick handlebar mustache. And he was a little scary, but he had like very like trusting dad vibes to him.
Sure.
And I remember that he would smoke his cigars in the basement. And I remember, we set up our sleeping bags in the living room and everything. And Justine's father comes up from the basement and like the door swings open and it just smells like cigars. And like, maybe I'm like being dramatic, but this is how I remember it. Like, the door swings open and there's like, smoke from his cigar smoke that comes when he comes out of the door, and he's like, hey, have you guys ever seen Jaws? And of course we're all like, no, what's that?
Right.
And I don't know why he did that to us. But I don't remember my exact reaction. I do think I called my mom or my dad to come and pick me up, because I don't know if I made it through the night. And I also vividly remember not being able to sleep for maybe like 2 nights after that.
Wow.
And I went home and I told my parents, and my dad was of more prime age when Jaws actually came out. So he was telling me about all the lore and how much it freaked him out when he saw it in the theater, and like see it before you go swimming. And that
Right.
definitely didn't help my fear at all. So yeah, that was my first horror movie. It replays in my mind every now and again.
And what I love about this, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but had you not watched Jaws that night, would you have all the same memories of that night that you had? Like, would you remember everything so vividly if Jaws would not have been a part of the picture? Like, did that
Oh, of
help to
course
capture
not.
all these memories,
I was 8 years old. I probably wouldn't remember a damn thing. But here I am, and it really replays like a movie. But the dad with the mustache and the cigar smoke, and yeah, it really is it was a movie in my head. I'm positive that's the reason why I remember. It might
That makes it
also be
so much
kind of a
better.
traumatic moment now that I think about it. Maybe I held on to that for a reason,
Right. Yeah, this is actually a therapy session. That's why I
Yeah,
invited you
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Get to the
Much
bottom
needed.
of this now. So we know how old you were and who you were with that night, which had to be fun because I remember, I grew up in a video store, and I was very lucky to have parents that owned a video store, and that's what we would do. We would have friends
Ooh,
come over that play scary
nice.
movies, and I was that guy. I was Justine in my group. So,
Yeah.
Jaws obviously very influential movie with so many different scenes that still impact all of us to this day. But which scene from Jaws would you say it was that affected you the most, the young little zero gravity?
Well, it really had nothing to do with the shark at all, especially since it had been quite an amount of years from me watching the movie from when the movie originally came out. I was taken out of it a little bit, of course, because it was an old movie, and you could tell that the shark is not real. But Ben Gardner's head, when they're looking for the missing Ben Gardner, and they come upon his boat and they do a little investigating, and then his head, like there's like a big bite in the boat, and then his head, his like severed head pops out of the hole. That's what got me 100%. And that's another detail that I do remember very vividly, coming home and crying about it to my parents. And they're saying, like, sharks like that, it's not real. And I'm like, no, it's not the shark. It's the head. And it,
Right.
because it's like, it's a pretty decent jump scare, really.
Oh, we did a top 10 favorite jump scares of all time, and that was 100% on my list.
Rightfully
Like
so.
he grabs that tooth out, and then the music and the swell of the head, and him screaming and dropping the tooth to the ocean floor. Like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
what an amazing scene that was. And
Mhm.
funny enough, I believe it was that scene. They actually didn't include that in the first cut of the film, and Spielberg wanted something a little more, so they actually filmed that scene in his swimming pool in his backyard to capture that scene because he wanted something a little scarier at that moment. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
that's fucking dedication, man. Like that's
Yeah.
one of the best jump scares of all time. And he was just like, hey, we're not going to release this movie yet. We're going to cut this back in. You guys can research. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I was wrong one time in the 90s, so it could happen again. But I'm pretty sure that's the scene that he went back and reshot in his swimming pool. Um, so Zero, we know which scene it was that affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene from Jaws is?
Oh, the finale, when the shark gets blown up, by
Mm-hmm.
far. I'm a hmm, this is gonna sound really bad, but I am very easily entertained. Which is why I don't love to call myself a movie critic, because I can admit that I love bad movies. But that being said, if it's got explosions and scares and action, like that's like 60% of the way for me.
Right.
So when that shark blew up, that was like, it was like the grand finale and like almost the most badass part of the film. So, and the stakes were high, and like your heart is beating because there's all this tension because the boat is sinking, and it's like, oh my god. And then
Yeah.
you know what I mean, you see the movie.
And he delivers one of the most memorable lines of all time right before he shoots him. Smile, you son of a. Boom!
Boom.
I
It's like
love that.
you
I'm
want to
so
like
with you.
clap. You have to clap
Yes.
after that. Mhm.
So this a movie does not have very many kills in it, especially not very many that you can see very well. So
Mhm.
we do, as horror fans, we do love the kills. What kill would you say is your favorite or most memorable from Jaws?
Um, Probably like the bottom up shot with the legs that they used for all the promotional material. Um, because you can like imagine being in that situation when you're swimming. And then of
Yeah,
course I had to go on the way that I would like deal with stuff when I was younger is I would just like research a bunch of it, because the more I know, the less scary it is, I guess.
sure.
Um, and so, I ended up watching all of these ads and how I got, quote, see it before you go swimming in my head. And you can't not think of that when you're swimming, especially like in beach, or like, not a pool, like
Yeah,
somewhere where you can't see the bottom and you never know like what is looking up at you. And that's what you would look like in that instance, just like the legs dangling. I'm like, this could be me at any moment. So
right. And I'm with you. Like, I think that's the reason I didn't get potty trained for a long time. They were like, you go on the toilet, and I'm like, water,
yeah, no.
shark, live
Yeah.
water, mom. No, thank you. I like my butt where it is, not in a
Yeah.
shark's mouth. So, um, a question I've been asking recently, and completely objectified. This is up to you. remakes, requels, what have you, are kind of taken over right now. They're a very
Mhm.
popular thing, and when done right, a remake can be amazing. I'm looking at you, Child's Play. I'm looking at you, Evil Dead. But would you like to see Jaws remade today?
Um, I'm probably gonna say no. Like, am I asking for it? No, just because the shark attack subgenre has like exploded since then. And
Right.
Jaws, you know, theoretically gave birth to a lot of good shark movies. There's a lot of good shark movies out there.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
really are. I do think so. And if it wasn't for Jaws, then those movies would never exist, really. That whole subgenre wouldn't be a
Mhm.
subgenre. It would just be a niche or something. So I think we have enough of that shark subgenre where, I mean, I'm definitely not asking it to die. Whenever Shark Week rolls around, I'm on cloud nine. Um,
Sure.
but we have a lot of that subgenre where I would prefer to see a new shark story, as
Mhm.
opposed to bringing back an old one. Um, yeah, I think final answer. But also, like I said just a minute ago, I'm very easy to please. And I'm also one of those fans that's just kind of like, I'm happy with whatever I can get. Like
Sure.
I will analyze it later, but if it's coming out, I'm gonna consume it and then I'll think about it and then I'll say my thoughts later. But I'm not one of those fans who's like, don't do this. Like
Right.
if somebody were to make the decision to make a Jaws remake or reboot or miniseries or whatever, I would be like, okay, I'm gonna watch that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
That,
didn't ask for it, but I'm gonna be there in the theater.
that's definitely that's how I feel. Like I'm not clamoring for it,
Yeah,
but if it happened, I'd watch it. Like
of
100%, I'd
course.
watch it.
Yeah.
I would just go in with the really big hope that they continue to stay practical with the shark. I don't hate CGI. I'm not anti CGI. I think CGI can do wonderful things when it's touching up practical effects, but when you
Mhm.
completely rely on CGI, I think it can ruin a film. So Zero, I've had an amazing time talking about Jaws, that being your first horror movie and what that means to you. But now I kind of want to throw a little bit of a curveball here to you. My little buddy Ghostface has a question for you.
Okay.
What's your favorite scary movie, Zero? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh, I hate this question. This
And that's
question
why
is
I ask it
so
and
hard.
never tell anybody I'm going to, because it makes it that much
Mm,
more fun.
you know what? Give me 1 second. Let me look at my shelf. Mm, I I really have not a damn clue. But what I can say is I love apocalypse films. I think the zombie subgenre is probably my favorite subgenre. But the only film that tops my love for zombie cinema would probably be the movie Event Horizon, which is 100% my jam. Um, oh, 100% my jam. All right. Now, if they rebooted Event Horizon, I might ask for that. I might put my ballot in. But besides that one standalone, I love anything and everything having to do with zombies. And before you even think about it, I am dedicated to The Walking Dead.
Mhm.
And even though it's ran itself into the ground, but I was there for the comics. I was there for the AMC spinoff, the Telltale series. I've played the VR game. Just
Love Clementine. Love the Telltale series.
yeah, that's my girl. Oh
Yes,
my
for
gosh,
sure.
don't you feel like we watched her grow up? It's like she's such a responsible, badass young woman. I remember when the first chapter when she was this big. I
When
do
she
have
got
that
that,
hat.
I remember when she got the hat.
Yep. I got a replica somewhere around here.
That's such an amazing. I loved the Telltale series, and I do love The Walking Dead. I'm very disappointed to hear that Carol Melissa McBride is not going to be part of the spinoff with Daryl anymore. I think that's extremely
Yeah.
disappointing. But schedule conflicts happen. So I
Yeah.
do want to touch real quick.
Let's
Event
go.
Horizon is probably in
Mhm.
my top 10 most underrated horror movies of all time.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that movie is totally Hellraiser meets Alien. Like it's just
Yeah.
So good.
100%. And I'm sure you remember there was a time on Twitter when the horror sphere was having this like huge debate. It wasn't even a debate. We were all on the same side. But you know, some movie journalist out there said something along the lines of horror doesn't take place in space. And you know, everyone was here to back it up. Like, have you seen Event Horizon? Have you seen it?
Right.
Have you seen it?
Well,
Because that
Alien.
is,
I mean, like,
yeah,
the thing is, like, oh, well, you can't be listen, fear of the unknown is the biggest horror in the world. And what is more unknown than space?
I don't
You
think
know,
anything.
in space, no one can hear you scream.
That's terrifying. That sentence is terrifying.
One of the best
Yeah,
taglines to any film ever.
yeah. I
I
would
mean,
say
and look
that
at Event
one.
Horizon, like you said, like all the things that happened throughout that movie. And I listen for a scarier, look for a scarier ending to a horror movie. I'm not talking about sadder, I'm not talking about darker. I'm talking about scarier end to a horror movie than Event Horizon when that door shuts by itself when you think everything's done. You're just like, no, it's not done. What's happening here?
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Like if chef's kiss, flawless.
Oh, and that's another one I agree with you. Like, I would definitely watch it if they rebooted that movie. But um, before we go any farther, I do got one last question for you. We're going to go back to Jaws. And what we're
Okay.
going to do is we're going to rank this on a skull count.
Okay.
Now, we're not ranking Jaws on production, score, direction. We're not being critics, which you already said you don't like to do anyway. What we're doing here is we're going to judge this strictly on how much it affected you on first viewing. And I think I know the answer, but I got to ask. It's part of the
Okay.
format. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 skulls being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of Jaws be?
Mm, I'm going to say, mm, I'm going to say 3.5, actually. Um, it was a very memorable slash potentially traumatic time moment, I guess. And yeah, I guess it planted the seed in there, you know. Um, but as far as like my continuing love for horror goes, really didn't begin until probably late middle school. I was
Mhm.
actually, I mean, I'm sure for most of the people that you have on your show, I'm a little bit late to the game in terms of when I entered the fandom. But the reason why I entered the fandom was unfortunately not because I loved horror growing up, which I mean I didn't really. I've always loved superheroes and explosions and chaos and stuff like that, but specifically the horror genre didn't come until late middle school. And the reason for that is I used to be just chronically like a chronic scaredy cat. I was just scared of like everything in like absolutely everything. And I think it's funny that you mentioned the toilet when we were talking about Jaws earlier, because that's actually the moment that I told myself you can't live like this. I had this very strange fear of like public automatic flushing toilets. I don't know why. I mean, it's like pathetic, right? And I don't know, it got to the point where like I wouldn't use the toilet if it had an automatic flusher because I don't know, I was scared it's gonna suck me up or something. I don't know. But I said to myself one day, I was like, you know what? This is pathetic. Like you can't live like this. And like I mentioned earlier, my middle school logic way of dealing with things was to just dive into the research. So naturally, middle school logic was like, okay, how do you be less scared of things? Oh, obviously, watch all the horror movies, read all the horror comics, just like go, you know, balls deep in it, and then maybe you build up a tolerance. And I think that it worked. It also turned me into a little bit of a sick fuck, but I think it worked. A sick fuck with a tolerance, I guess. But that's the reason. And it was really just to change something that I didn't like about myself. And in doing so, I actually found something that I really loved. And that could meant like mix very nicely with my previous fandoms that I actually had, like growing up, video games and comics and anime, manga specifically. When I found that sweet spot of horror manga on, you know, on Reddit and on Tumblr, like that you have to search to find, oh my God, my mind was blown. I was like, I should have been living
Right.
here for years. And then, you know, from then until present day, I've just been trying to catch up. You know, I have a long list of things I need to catch up on, and there's constantly new great horror coming out. So, you know, I got work to do, like every other fan out
Right.
there.
Well, it's coming in better late than never.
Of course, yeah.
And it's funny you say that you're a sick fuck, because we're all sick fucks, and you know what
Yeah.
they say.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
It's true.
So-
It is.
So it's just one of those things that I feel, and this is, I'm no psychiatrist by any stretch of the imagination. Disclaimer, this is just me and my personal beliefs. I feel like the kids that grew up in horror and had an education about horror are actually the ones that are more grounded in reality. They learned at a young age, like, this is fantasy. It's fun to watch, but this is not something that you need to be scared of. This is not something that you go around stabbing people like Michael Myers.
Right.
But I feel like the kids that got the education about horror at a young age, rather than shielded from it, actually benefit from it. Just like anything else, you know, sex ed, drug education, drinking. If you're drinking responsibly, do what you do. But the education is a huge key to life in any aspect that you have. So I have people, you know, my daughter's 2 years old and she loves Michael Myers, loves him to death. And,
Love
you know, people
that.
are like, that's kind of weird and twisted. I'm like, or it's not. You know, this is something I've never forced it on her. She, you know, she was watching a movie with me one day and she loved it. And I'm going to let my kids be themselves. I'm going to teach her, to educate her. That's not what we do. We don't go around stabbing people in the throats with fluorescent bulbs. But if this is what you love and this is something that you enjoy at 2 and you can carry that with you, okay.
Oh yeah.
My son is 13. He's like, I don't give a fuck about horror movies. You know, and that's fine.
Really?
Oh, he doesn't give a shit. He loves Saw. That's about it. But besides that, he's like,
Okay.
I don't give a shit.
Okay.
Let's turn on the baseball game. And I'm like, yeah, cool. But I do want to say, guys, we are at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before it does, there's some links that need to click in down here in the description. So make sure you're clicking these links, following Xero on everything that she is doing in social media and in her life, because you're going to want to stay up to date on all the spookiest MC in New York, guys. Shit. So you're going to want to keep up with everything that she's doing. So Xero, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.